Hello there, John Siddique here, and I've just finished my Thursday book group, my reading group in Bradford, and come for my regular cup of coffee, and I thought this is a lovely way to make a video. I enjoyed making last week's video so much in a kind of more open setting, so I thought I would do the same again today. And yeah, we've been hit by colds and flu today, so the group was down 5 people. There must be something going around in Bradford, and so we were down to kind of just a group of 6 today, and one off on holiday. So nothing to panic about, because a smaller group gives you much more chance to be able to talk and to be able to go more in depth with things, and kind of for maybe people who don't speak as much in larger groups, to kind of give themselves a chance to kind of come out a little bit. And last week the story by Chimamanda Adichie was very long actually, and I learnt a great deal from that about kind of the length of story to use. It was good, but it felt like trying to squeeze in the Milosh poem at the end. We didn't really get to talk as deeply about it or have as much time about it as I would have liked. So today we had an all poetry day. I was actually going to look at a story by a writer who's actually a friend of mine, Shah, called The Nosepin. But then when I read it through this week, I realised that it was going to just take up all of the time, and actually there wouldn't be much room to actually talk about it at all. So I'm going to see what else BIna has got and have a look at one of her stories at a later date, maybe in the kind of the new year. So that presented us with a lovely opportunity today to have an all poetry session, because sometimes poetry kind of gets left out, and people often have a kind of fear of the P word, you know, because of English literature and the complexity of things, and we have to kind of talk about what we think this means and what the writer's alluding to and all this sort of stuff. So I wanted to kind of choose some poems that didn't do that, that didn't challenge us in that way, but actually wanted us to read them. And so that meant going outside of the English canon. And one of the group had mentioned last week that she really had enjoyed a poem she'd read by Mary Oliver, and as those of you who kind of follow my videos and my work will know, Mary Oliver is one of my favourite poets. So we had a look at 3 poems by Mary Oliver. We had a look at The Journey. I've got them here in front of me. We had a look at The Journey. We had a look at Wild Geese, and we had a look at When I Am Among Trees. And people were really just so surprised at the kind of the invitation in these poems to their own hearts, into feeling that the ordinariness and the beauty of their own lives was valuable, and Mary's kind of such clean, accurate use of language, how it kind of just didn't kind of put any kind of pressure or barrier up against the reader, but allowed you to kind of just to be truly in the poem. An excerpt from The Journey by Mary Oliver. It was already late enough, on a wild night, and the road full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of cloud, and there was a new voice, which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save. Beautiful. And so I wanted for my second poet to not contrast in terms of material, but to kind of just have a kind of a contrast in that I chose a male poet writing in quite a similar vein to Mary Oliver. So this kind of deep sort of ordinary sacred dimension of human life, and the ordinary things that make our lives what they are. So I chose Galway Kinnell, who was, unfortunately he died in 2014, was such a kind of strong, bear-like man. If you ever met him, I was very fortunate to meet him on a couple of occasions, and had a small correspondence with him over the last couple of years of his life, and just to kind of look at the kind of the difference of a kind of a man writing about kind of the same sort of thing. Now the thing with Galway Kinnell is that kind of, even though he was kind of huge, 6'4" at least, bear-like, and even in his 80s had this intense kind of Irish American sort of beauty about him, had such a massive heart, such a kind of big all-encompassing heart. And I was telling the group the story of when you kind of would go to one of his readings and you were having your book signed afterwards. He didn't make you sort of just stand there while he signed your book and say some sort of platitude to you, but he would actually have a chair next to his, and so when it was your turn to have your book signed, he would say, "Come and sit with me," and kind of he would actually talk to you properly for a few minutes, and then would say, "So excuse me now, I need to kind of talk to the next person," and you felt like you'd been properly met as a human being, and he was more interested in you. It was just incredible. So here's a little excerpt from one of his poems. An excerpt from Wait by Galway Kinnell. But trust the hours. Haven't they carried you everywhere up to now? Personal events will become interesting again. Hair will become interesting. Pain will become interesting. Buds that open out of season will become lovely again. Second-hand gloves will become lovely again. Their memories are what give them the need for other hands. And the desolation of lovers is the same. That enormous emptiness, carved out of such tiny beings as we are, asks to be filled. The need for the new love is faithfulness to the old. So there you go. And I snuck one more poem at the end because in the final Galway poem that we read, I didn't tell you the names of the poems that we looked at. We looked at St. Francis and the Sow, which is probably his most famous poem. A poem called Wait, which he wrote for one of his students when her boyfriend broke up with her and she was completely heartbroken. And then a poem called Oatmeal from a collection that he wrote a long time ago, called something like When You've Lived by Yourself for Too Long. So it's about kind of imagining friends turning up, in his case poetry friends that have been long dead, to have oatmeal with him. So he has this conversation with John Keats about the nature of poetry and porridge, which is just truly delightful. And he ends the oatmeal poem by realising that he's got cold, old baked potatoes for his lunch that are left over from the day before. So he's going to invite the poet Patrick Kavanagh to have cold baked potatoes with him, or reheated baked potatoes with him. So I slipped On Raglan Road by Patrick Kavanagh in at the back of the collection of poems for today, but we didn't have time to read that, so people have taken that poem home to read at home if they want to. So the group is going so beautifully, and they were saying today that they just felt kind of held in this beautiful space, and that the literature was kind of, showing them so many different things that they've been kind of, one woman was saying she felt quite closed in her reading, and how this was beginning to kind of open her up to so many more new things. And I just think we all felt like that, actually. And even as me reading these pieces and kind of having to find things each week to kind of share with a group, I find myself being sort of challenged to look anew and just kind of held by literature, which kind of is so much more than kind of being academic and kind of thinking about things and you know, sort of this kind of narrow intelligence, but it's more about, as it's always has been, of course, is more about just kind of entering lives and entering the world and entering our own lives and entering our own worlds and seeing the ordinary beauty that's there. And if we choose the right writers to kind of walk alongside us, then we can find some amazing guides to the beauty of ordinariness. I love you and leave you because I need to pop home. We have guests this afternoon, and yeah, I'll be back next week with another one of those video blogs. So I hope you are enjoying these, and I'll put links for the books down below for the Mary Oliver and the Galway Kinnell books. If I can find a link for one of BIna's books as well, I'll put that down below, and grab those if you like. If you do get to read some Galway Kinnell or some Mary Oliver online or in a book, then maybe leave a comment down below and let me know how you've got on with them. It's just nice to share these materials with you. And thank you for joining me, and I'll speak to you very soon.